Let's look at John 4:32. Let's start with 31. Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him something to eat? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. Jesus is in a situation where he's hungry. It's clear that he's hungry. He might be fasting physically, very likely. The disciples come to him and say, you need to eat. And Jesus says, no, my food and my sustenance is doing the will of my Father. And immediately the disciples begin to think when he says, I have food that you know not of, that somebody had brought him physical food, because they cannot detach the physical. They keep going like this. They keep taking the physical realm and saying, this is the realm that we obey a certain rigid set of rules and things happen, and this is the spiritual realm, and it's just a set of beliefs that we have in our minds and in our hearts. And Jesus kept saying, that's not how it works. You have to merge those two. How you interact with this physical realm is a reflection about what you believe for your God. How you interact with your money, how you interact with food, how you interact in relationships, how you interact in your marriage. I can't consistently get in fights with my wife and say that I honor God. It can't happen. There has to be something that breaks through. There has to be work. There has to be humility. At some point, even this is really in our marriage that we have in conflict, and at some point, I thought that she needed to give way. I thought that she needed to stop and honor your husband. And I got to the point where I had to go, you know what? This isn't about who's right. This isn't about who's wrong. This isn't about our happiness. This isn't about Rachel, and this isn't about Brad. God commanded me to be a certain way in marriage, to love my wife as Christ loved the church. Am I doing that? Am I fulfilling that mandate? And when I began to fulfill that mandate, it changed everything, and God saw it as a fast because I prioritized His will. And I walked away from certain arguments. I fasted from certain words. I fasted from certain fights. I stepped away from things that I instinctively wanted to do, that my flesh wanted to do, in favor of the will of God for my marriage. And then I saw breakthrough. I had fasted before about my marriage. I had asked God to transform things. I'd prayed about it. Fasted 3 days. It wasn't until that came in that our marriage shifted dramatically. Until I said, I'm not in this for Rachel, I'm not in this for Brad, I'm in this for God. Jesus is consistently reminding the disciples, or attempting to remind the disciples, that everything that they do in this earth is a reflection of their relationship with God. And in John 6:27, he says, do not work for food that perishes, but for the food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you. Jesus is consistently saying, the thing that you think nurtures you, it'll rot, it'll perish. This thing that you're taught to work for, this thing that you strive for in life, the thing that you go to school for, the thing that you're measured by socially, the things that you feel self-worth about, all these things perish. But let me tell you something. Eternal food does not perish. When you eat of me, you'll never go hungry, even when your stomach growls. When you eat of me, you'll be satisfied in the deepest places of your soul. When you eat of me, I'll do something for you that no meal can, that no money can, that no man can, that nothing else can do for you. What's amazing is that fasting is not about abstaining at all. It's about indulging. That's what blows me away. I've been thinking fasting is about abstaining, and it's all about indulging, because you're leaving one food for another. You're leaving one thing in this physical plane that you make your belly your God, which Paul says in Philippians, but you're leaving that behind for another food that is eternally existing and sustaining in a whole new way. Fasting in the flesh becomes indulgent in the spirit. When you begin to deny your desires, your will, in place of the will of God, when you change that out, Mom, and you place God's will in the stead of your will, you find a luxurious state of being. You find yourself so full. You find yourself so satisfied. You find yourself so provided for. And I think that Jesus is trying to associate that provision. See, This is what we miss. And in our churches, we have to watch this. We constantly are looking for evidence of God and physical provision. We can't do that. That's backwards. Physical provision is a reflection of our spiritual sustenance with God. Look at this. Then they said to him, what must we do? He says, truly I say to you, in verse 26, Jesus answered them, truly, truly I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. You're following me not because you saw the signs that I was able to multiply the loaves. You're following me because I'm the one that has the bread. You know, I don't even want to talk to you at this point because you're sitting here you're following me for breadcrumbs. At some point, we can get to a place where we keep putting demands on God for the physical without ever acknowledging His will in the matter and without ever stopping, without ever saying, wait a minute, I need to do a fast of the heart. I need to indulge in Christ. I need to indulge in God's will for my life. I need to maybe pull away from the things that I want, pull away from the things that make me quote-unquote successful, pull away from the things that seem familiar or feel good. I need to pull away from the things that nourish my flesh, G. Paul, and I instead need to indulge in the things of the Spirit. I'm done. So here we go. What you see is three types of people, right? You see the believer in name only. You see the people that would acknowledge God, the people who could be like Daniel. They would have acknowledged God. They would have spoke to God with their mouths, but they would have indulged in that which defiled them. And thinking that they weren't breaking the law, thinking that they weren't defiled, thinking that because it wasn't in a book that they were okay, missing the entire heart and intent of God. There's a lot of believers that do that. They just say, yeah, I'm with Jesus, and I'm covered, and so I can just live however I want to live, and I can stick one foot in and one foot out. And God says, you know what? You least of all I like. Pick hot or pick cold. But don't be lukewarm because I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. You either take it all or you leave it all. I know that there was things in my life that when I accepted Jesus, I wrestled with. Even my politics. I believed a certain way, and I kept wrestling because I was like, man, this is not a reflection of how God operates in the world, and eventually I had to pick one. And I left my politics because I ain't leaving my God. My politics didn't give me anything. My politics didn't lead me to a place. My God gave me everything. My God will save my family, not my politics. And the second person is those who fast like the Pharisees. And let's look at Isaiah 58 real quick so we have an idea. Those who fast and are rejected by God. Cry aloud, do not hold back, lift up your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their transgression, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways. They delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that did righteousness and did not forsake the judgment of their God. They ask me of righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why have we fasted and you see it not? This is the people asking God. Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no knowledge of it? Behold, in the day of your fast, you seek your own pleasure and oppress all your workers. Behold, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to hit with a wicked fist. Fasting like yours this day will not make your voice be heard on high. God, we can say, okay, well, I don't beat anybody while I fast. I don't hit anybody with my fist. I'm not wicked in that way. I don't mandate my workers do something. I'm not cruel when I fast. But are you fasting for your own pleasure? Have you begun fasting? Because let me put it like this. When I did my 40-day fast, it sounds like an amazing thing that's pursuing God, but it was rooted in a little bit of selfishness. I really wanted a gifting from God, and I always attributed it to wanting to do more from His kingdom. I'm friends with a lot of prophets. A lot, it's like 2, but still, that's a lot for most people. And you guys don't have 2 prophet friends that you can call on the phone. Yeah. I loved them. I love these guys because they're so humble and they walk in this authority, and people listen to what they have to say because they can tell you what you ate for breakfast, what your bank account is, and where you at in the spiritual realm of things. And I just adored that. I was like, that's amazing. If I had that, people would listen to the revelation that I have about the Word. If I had that, I could get the attention. I had such a desire to prove that God existed through miracles that I was pursuing. And I said, if I just lay down my flesh for 40 days, God will give me something. And in the middle of that fast, God said, here's your choice. And he laid out me. Should I? Yeah, I'll tell it. Here's your choice. He laid out two pictures of me. He laid out a picture of me and a vision. It was the only thing I had during my fast. It was like 5 seconds long. I thought I was just starving to death. It's like day 22, but I knew it was God. So I see a screen, two screens, and one is me preaching in auditoriums, and I have an intense and an immeasurable gift of prophecy, and it's just incredible, and I'm just filling auditoriums, but I'm alone. I'm totally alone. It's just a blur of faces and a lot of people hearing the gospel, but there's felt like something empty behind it, right? There's something that's not quite right. The other one, I was just a simple man at a table, standing up. I had a robe on, and there was this extended table, and I could recognize my family laughing. And there was light, and I could recognize that they were sharing in the joy of the Lord at this extended table. And I wanted so bad to pick the gift, so bad. I thought, well, surely if I have a gift like that, my family will be saved, right? They'll hear me. They'll come to the Lord. Surely, if I follow that path, things will work out for my family as well. And surely, it's their responsibility what they do with their salvation in their life, not mine. I said, God, what's the right choice? He said, there is no right choice. I said, okay. Prayed. And in pain, I picked the latter one. The one with my family, the one with the table. I picked that one. And it hurt. It hurt bad because that's not why I didn't eat for 40 days. I didn't eat for 40 days for the other one. I wanted to see what Elder Marguerite was doing this morning. I'm nosy. I want to know y'all's business. God says you picked the right one. I was like, you said there was no right one. You picked the right one. And I thought for years, I was like, well, how did I pick the right one? How did I pick the right one? And I'm beginning to see the manifestation of what he showed me now. I'm beginning to walk in the fullness of what, not even the fullness, the start of what he showed me then now. And what I realized, Mom, is that I had laid down my desire for what I thought was God's desire and what proved to be God's desire. And in that moment, even though it sounds great and both were great options, I laid down what I wanted for what he wanted. And even though I was fasting to attain something that I thought I needed and thought I wanted, I ultimately gave it up for what he wanted. And I wouldn't change it for the world. I may never have the ability to tell you what your bank account is. Therefore, I never have the ability to defraud you. So don't worry. God uses me nonetheless. And I found my role and position in his kingdom. And the reason that my life is satisfying is my wife has words of knowledge. My mom has access to the president. I have friends who are prophet. I have all these different things. But I recognize that if my life was going to be as it should, I needed to fit into the kingdom and obey God's will the way that he wanted to. I needed to find my place of influence. I needed to find my position and begin to adapt everything physical around that spiritual position. And that's the mistake that we make, because even in Hosea and throughout Isaiah and throughout various points in the Bible, God says, I'm sick of your fast, because ultimately, even though you're denying food, you're fasting for your belly. Ultimately, even though you're denying food and denying yourself, you're fasting for your own pleasure. Ultimately, you might be going to church and giving, but you're giving to me because you want a car. Ultimately, you might be going to church and sowing, but you're doing so because it's a checklist for something that you want. Ultimately, you might be fasting, but you're doing so, Brad, because you simply want a gift. Ultimately, how about what I want, God says? I want a people that want to know what I want. And that is the fast. That's the key. That's why David was the number one faster, because his entire life was spent saying, what does God want? And Mom pointed it out, the one time that he moved away from the things of the Spirit to influence the flesh is the time that he counted his army, and God said, okay, David, you messed up. I covered you in all these other areas, but you messed up with that one. You walked away from putting me first. You counted your army first and put me second. I said you were going to win. Now you get judgment. And that's the thing, is once you begin to walk in the fullness of the things of God and walk in spiritual places, and once you walk into that realm, you don't get to walk out. You don't get to a place where you're comfortable in life. You don't get to a place where the physical things feel right, where they just line up just right. You're right where you want to be and get to say, okay, God, I'm good. Thank you for the ride. You pick one or the other. And you are a people that will benefit from the things of God if you pursue His will in your life. And what I'm asking you to do this month as we come into agreement and to see the good of God is not simply to abstain from food. I'm asking you to do a true Daniel's fast, which means placing God's will first in your heart and in your life. I don't mean eating vegetables. I mean analyzing that which is idolatrous around you and saying, I'm abstaining from that. I'm placing God first, and I'm going to take the next 30 days and circumcise my heart with the help of the Holy Spirit so that I can ensure that my emotions, my mind, my will is second to that which God wills for my life. That's a true fast. And then when you're fasting like that, there'll be moments when God says, push away the plate. And you push away the plate to get His attention. Because you're already living a life of fasting. But you recognize that there's a situation you need to remind God. It is okay to remind God when you're following His will. Because it's not about you, it's about Him. God, you said you were going to do this. You got to get it done. Because I care more about you than I do myself. And your name is more important to me than my own. God, your reputation, you say a reputation is greater than a weight of bag of gold. So God, your reputation is at stake. Let me remind you of your reputation in the earth. Let me remind you of your will. You cannot allow Israel to fail. You cannot allow them to go to slavery. You cannot contain them for more than 400 years. God, they have to be delivered. They have to get Canaan. They have to go to where you promise. Because if they don't, it's your namesake that suffers. Israel will be forgotten. But there'll always be a blemish on your name if you fail, God. And the reason that I'm fasting this, the reason that I'll fast my video games, the reason that I'll fast my food, the reason that I'll change, it's not about exactly what I do and what the religious checklist is. It's about the fact that I say, God, I'm going to keep adapting to whatever your will is so that I can remind you that I'm pursuing it every morning of every day. And I'll think this through, how it works for you. You need to speak to me. And whatever it is I got to do, I'm here to follow you. So empower me to do so, God, and shift things according to your perfect will.